We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the Doomsday Podcast, the post-draft special, but we record this as the draft continues to unfold. Cowboys trading down over and over again, and in the fourth round, and then wanted to pick up a couple extra fifth-round picks. And so this is a team that has gone from having a decent number of picks at the start of this thing to, last I looked at, they had created about 8 picks for themselves. I think they'll end up for the day with 9 picks. We'll get to some of those, but we need to talk about what happened on Friday night, which was basically like the first night of the draft for the Cowboys, because they finally got their draft pick. It is Matt Mosley alongside Ed Werder, Frito Nation Productions. It's the Doomsday Podcast. It is a draft special, and as you've come to expect, the Doomsday Podcast has reached out to, and when I say the Doomsday Podcast, mostly Ed Werder has reached out to a huge amount of coordinators, of GMs. And Ed, I'll let you say it. I want you to tease the guest we will be having in just a matter of moments. Someone that has really had an up close look at the Cowboys' second round pick, their first pick, number 58, Trysten Hill, the defensive lineman out of University of Central Florida.
Well, the interesting thing about Trysten Hill is getting to the truth, I think, about what exactly the Cowboys have acquired here with this pick. The defensive coordinator, Rod Marinelli, is a guy who's highly regarded for his ability to develop and motivate players on the defensive line, maybe be the best guy in the whole league at that. And he has spoken with high regard to Trysten Hill, who oddly was a starter throughout his career until his final season there last year. There was a coaching change at Central Florida. Scott Frost left to go to Nebraska. Josh Heupel took over, and the defensive coordinator is Randy Shannon. Randy Shannon was the 11th round draft pick in 1989 for the Dallas Cowboys, who were coached by Jimmy Johnson. He also played for Jimmy at Miami. And we're going to talk to Randy Shannon so that we can get the absolute truth about what this guy has as a player and what he's like to coach and how he interacts with his teammates. In the meantime, I did reach out to 4 other defensive coordinators to get their perspective on this player. The first one told me that their defensive line coach really, really liked him. Another said, like him, think he can really play. Reminds me of Sheldon Richardson, really athletic inside guy taken 13th overall some years ago by the New York Jets, who has now played for, I think he's on his 4th team. He's had 23 and a half career sacks. Now here's where we get to, I think, the issues we need to clarify with Randy Shannon. Another defensive coordinator in the NFC told me he's, quote, very immature kid. Not sure he loves football. Very talented player. Ooh. And then finally, the final coordinator I spoke to said he's a good athlete for a big guy, has several issues, thought he would go in the 4th or 5th round. Now,
so they, in their opinion, this was a bit of a reach by the Cowboys.
Well, but and there are a lot of different. There's probably 100 different opinions of every player who gets drafted during this time of year in the NFL. And I think it's worth noting that I got a lot of bad reviews when the Cowboys took Travis Frederick with their first-round pick at the bottom of the first round a few years ago. And obviously, he's turned into one of the stalwarts on the offensive line, a perennial Pro Bowl player. And we saw how valuable he was when he missed all of last season. So everybody has an opinion. They're not all correct. We'll give this player, Trysten Hill, a chance to prove what he is and how he interacts with his teammates. But just to get a sense for what you can expect, I think those are a good variety of opinions across the league about this player who's a dynamic inside guy. I mean, he's over 300 pounds. He's not used to playing over a guard. He gets great penetration. He's a good pass rusher. I think the questions are how easy is he to motivate? Now, Marinelli said he spoke to him on the phone. They've developed a father-son type of relationship throughout this draft process, that they were calling one another frequently. And then Rod said, he's agreed to sign this work ethic contract that I have everybody sign. Well, that's all good and well, so they know what to expect. The problem is they'd already drafted him when he signed it. So
yeah, and by the way, this is.
I think this might be a Randy Shannon calling right now.
Oh, you're kidding? We might. We could do this right now. Ed is. I like that you're getting to hear this. Ed is taking calls from insiders across the NFL as we speak. And Ed, if it appears that is that not him?
That wasn't him.
Okay, all right. That was some other insider. Ed's checking in. I love that. People think we did that on purpose. It wasn't. Ed, I would like you to maybe at some point think about turning your phone down there, but put that on vibrate. But I like the sound of that. I like the sound effects. Ed,
you know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
Trey Wingo, when I was doing work in studio on the NFL shows, and Trey Wingo, our good friend, was the host. It amused him that I didn't turn my phone off. And the reason I didn't turn my phone off is because somebody might call with a good piece of information that I'd like to get on the show as quickly as possible. So Wingo would invariably throw to me, and he can see me over there. And I would launch into whatever my report was, and he would start calling me on my phone to see how I would handle that situation. On live television, he's deliberately interrupting my live report, risking all kinds of damage to the quality of the show.
Yeah.
And all for his own amusement. That's our guy.
Well, that goes all the way back to his Fidelt days at Baylor. It is Ed Werder, the Hall of Famer himself, in studio, Frito Nation Productions. We are getting ready to talk to Trysten Hill's former defensive coordinator at Central Florida. This will be fascinating because part of the crux of why some people were kind of down on Trysten Hill weren't down on his ability. And even the tape, I don't think this is a guy, a lot of times with defensive linemen, especially guys that can play inside, Ed, you'll hear, the motor's not always running. When you turn on the tape, and I was watching the highlights. Now, the problem is when you're watching ESPN's coverage of NFL Network, Ed, they don't usually show like the really bad highlights. Yeah. Oh, here's where he got owned. Somebody brought it up that in a game against a big-time quality opponent.
LSU.
Was it LSU? Yeah, was that Leberton? Leberton's so LSU'd up. He was bringing that up that I think this kid had one tackle in that game. But that's the
well, if what this defensive coordinator told me is true, that you're not sure he loves football, well, of all the things, if you're going to be a defensive tackle, you got to love football. I mean, it's the worst position of all to play. You're getting blocked by guys coming at you from all different angles. You're often, overmatched in terms of the number of players who are blocking you to try to prevent you from succeeding with your intent and your assignment. But it was interesting that, Trysten Hill, when he talked to the media on the conference call after the draft, he spoke about Marinelli and how much his presence means to him. And he described himself as, he said, I think I'm a dominant, tenacious player. That wants every bit of the competition. That's how I was raised. That's how I'm going to go work day in and day out. I'm excited to get to work. So there are two opposite, divergent opinions of Trysten Hill. His and that some other defensive coordinators in the NFL have about him. Now, obviously, the Cowboys must feel good about it. And I think if you're the Cowboys, you have to give Rod Marinelli the benefit of the doubt. Now, the interesting thing, Matt, was the two players who were on the board. Well, there were three safeties on the board that they had brought into the star, which is obviously a position of need. And the other player that they considered drafting when they made the decision on Hill, the conversation was about Hill, and it was about Juan Thornhill. Now, the argument for taking Thornhill is that he makes plays on the ball, and the Cowboys have been one of the worst teams at intercepting passes in the league. Their defense had 9 interceptions last year, tied for 26 in the NFL, and they had none in the 2 playoff games. And of the 9 interceptions, rookie linebacker Leighton Vander Esch tied for the team lead with 2, and defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence had 1, as many as any cornerback on the team, and 1 more than their best corner, Byron Jones. So that's the reason that there was a conversation about whether to take Hill or Thornhill. They went with the shorter of the 2 Hills. They took Hill.
Okay, they did get. Although this is a tall man, this Hill is he's a big dude, and boy, on film, and you saw some of these things. He fires off the ball. He's the first one. When you look at that defensive line, looks like at the way he lines up, he takes on all blockers, and he's got a lot of quickness. And I this 2000 what are we in 19 now? It was a 2018 season though. We're just coming off of. That gives me pause when a player. And again, we're going to talk to in a few moments. Randy Shannon, his defensive coordinator, and we'll try to get some of these answers. How do you take a guy? It's not like Central Florida. They've had a really good run here under Scott Frost, and then Josh Heupel, as you mentioned, but. This guy was a valuable starting player. There's really, it doesn't, on the surface, you got to wonder why in the world was this guy suddenly coming off the bench? Ed, you have booked us the perfect guest for this moment.
So we talked, Matt, about our podcast bringing in unique guests and perspective you're only going to get on the Cowboys from listening to us and the contacts that we've developed over the years covering the NFL. And one of my first year in Dallas covering the Dallas Morning News for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Jimmy Johnson had come in. He'd taken over from the University of Miami. He talks a lot about that first draft. Troy Aikman, Daryl Johnston, Mark Stepnoski, Tony Tolbert, and how he built the foundation of a Super Bowl dynasty with that draft. But he doesn't really talk very often about the guy who was the 11th round pick that year.
Who was that?
That was Randy Shannon.
Oh.
And he's a linebacker from Miami, and he's our guest right now to offer the unique insight we expect from his own experience as the University of Central Florida defensive coordinator, a man who has coached Trysten Hill, the Cowboys' first pick in this draft at number 58 overall. Randy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you guys.
Let me ask you this: what kind of player should Cowboys fans expect Trysten Hill to be in the Rod Marinelli style of defense?
You know what? He's remind me of a little bit of Sapp, but not that athletic. Very explosive, quick twitch guy that can run around and make a lot of plays for you. His tremendous asset is that he has a unique deal of causing havoc in the backfield. And Coach Marinelli, watching him through the years and what he's done always with his defensive linemen, he fits into that mold. Expect the young man is going to go out there and play hard every down. And he chases the ball harder than most defensive linemen I've ever been around. And that's unique, and that's something that you can't coach.
And that's something that Rod Marinelli really covets is a guy who will play all out on every plays on the field. And the way they work their rotation is you play until you can't, and when you can't, you come out no matter the situation because we want a fresh guy in there, and we have enough depth to create a solid rotation where anybody can come out at any time, and we trust the next guy. Would you expect Trysten to have an immediate impact in the NFL given the unique features you talked about?
Yes, I definitely will, because, the scheme that Dallas is running, the attack style 4-3, get up the field, the same type of scheme that we've run, here at UCF. And we've rotated just like they do in NFL. So we rotated at defensive tackle 5 guys. And you can see in NFL watching the trend is that you carry at least 4 defensive tackles minimum. So when those rotation going in, a guy's playing an average of maybe 35, 40 plays a game instead of playing 70 to 80 snaps, you're going to see a guy get tremendous effort, cause a lot of things that you need to do, a lot of negative plays, which you always know. And the big thing I think that he'll have that's going to be big for the Dallas Cowboys is that he'll get push up the middle. When the Dallas Cowboys and Coach Marinelli, when he was at Tampa, but when Dallas was very, very good, they had push up the middle by those big guys in the middle like Russell Maryland and those type of guys, getting big push. where you see Haley coming off the edges, getting sacks and creating a lot of havoc. And I think that's what you're going to see this year from Trysten.
I reached out to 4 defensive coordinators in the NFL to get their take on their evaluation of Trysten Hill, and everybody had nothing but positive things to say about his athletic ability, about how hard he plays. But one said they weren't sure he loves the game, and another said that they had him as a 4th or 5th round pick because of concerns they have about how difficult he can be to coach. Can you put into perspective what it was like to coach him?
It was fun, and I got along great with Trysten. It was like unusual because he's coming from a system that was like, okay, all you do is play over the center and you knock him backwards. And for 2 years, he got used to doing it, just knocking guys back, knocking back, and that was it. And, coming in and we talked a little bit, and I said, you played 15 games? He said, yes. I said, how many sacks did you have? He said, what? He said, how many sacks did you have in 15 games? He said, 1.5. I said, okay, good. You thought that was great? Yeah. I said, no, that's not great. I said, you got to understand, a defensive tackle got to be disruptive if you want to play at next level. I'm saying what we did at UCF the last 2 years was great. Played great defense, created a lot of turnovers. But for yourself as an individual, you have to now change your mindset. And it was hard for him because he was something for 2 years.
Right.
And, just talking to him constantly and getting him to understand that you have to change your mindset. And when he finally changed his mindset, you can see the difference between early in the year to late in the year, how he transformed into a different player. And that's the hard thing because if you're an NFL scout and general manager, you watch a guy didn't do much on film for 2 years, but just attack the center, you're going to be like, whoa, wait a minute, how could we take him that early? Because it's a 1 year that he's done successful. So that's the biggest difference.
And he only started 1 game last year for you. Why was that?
Well, because with us, everything is based on what you perform in practice and what you do. And so each day we tell them you're graded each day at a high level. And if you may not be the best player, but if you're performing at a high level in practice, you're giving it all, and you're going to start. And it was a couple of guys on that defense last year that had to go through that transition of practicing hard every day, because when you get to the next level, that's what they want. They want you to practice at a high level all the time. And I was just getting those guys ready and getting Trysten ready for practicing at a high level when he gets to that next stage.
Did he, Coach, at some point embrace that? Like, what was his reaction to being a guy that expected to start every game, and then you're like, you got to earn it every single practice? And so he was getting plenty of playing time. It's just he wasn't starting those games.
It's the thing that he was all, most young kids like start.
Uh-huh.
No, you got to earn the start. Playing is what you do. You got to earn the start. And throughout the course of the year, me and him would talk, and then we was kind of like open, like we have our one-on-one conversations, but also I would tell them guys, hey, treat me like I'm gonna treat you like an NFL. If you have something to talk or discuss that you don't think we're doing right, or we don't feel like we as a team, I said, not individual now. Everything is a team here. So if you see something in the team that we make and do better, let us know. But also, if we see something that you can do better, you need to let us know. And I give you, for instance, we played FAU, and we was coaching him up on, hey, when this happens, Trysten, they're going to turn you loose, and you have to tackle the running back, So that week he wasn't doing it right, joking around in practice, wasn't doing it right. So all of a sudden, 2 times in that FAU game, they turned him loose twice, and it was 2 touchdowns. So, boom. So now that's for us as coaches. Okay, now, Trysten, this is what happened. We told you this is going to happen. You didn't work on it in practice. And then all of a sudden, he's seen the big picture of it. You know what? They told me I didn't do it. Now I have to start getting better. And those things, sometimes you have to show young men like Trysten on these things we're talking about. You have to accept it instead of just not going through it. And he did. And that's why he has so much. If you look at his tackles for loss compared to the years before, it's like night and day. I mean, it's probably almost double or triple the tackles for loss in one season that he had compared to the first 2 seasons there.
It seems like he would have loved the opportunity you were providing him compared to what he was doing previously, yes?
Well, it would. And those guys that the staff before, they had him for 2 years, and He knew those guys.
Right.
He didn't know us.
They recruited him there.
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they recruited him there. He didn't know me. All he knows is that I coached a bunch of defensive linemen. We always played great defense, and every defensive lineman I've been a part of, from Warren Sapp to Vince Wilfork to Taven Bryan to my last year at Florida, just all was phenomenal defensive tackles, but he didn't understand why. And I think that sometimes you have to get those kids the why, and then towards the end of the season, like I said, he understood the why. But like anything else, everybody was working hard because they was on a one week trial basis on if you're going to start or not.
Is Coach? Is he kind of a funny guy? You know, it's interesting in reading some of these reports. It was he did like to provide feedback, maybe sometimes even when you guys didn't always want to hear it. Was he? You said he joked around in practice a little bit. Was he? Is it like a funny type thing? Does he have is he a big personality? Yeah.
No, he's not. He's not a belligerent kid or nothing like that. No, Trysten never belligerent. I mean, respectful. And like I would say, okay, you got a problem with this? And he'll like, no. I said, if you do, just tell me. Well, we need to find out. Hey, if we teaching it that you don't understand how we teaching it, you need to give us feedback because we got to teach you how you can perceive things. And I think that's what most coaches don't do, and I think Marinelli does a great job of it, is that you can tell a young man something, but he may turn it into something that he may hear something different. Or you may say, I want this done, and he may say, okay, I'm doing it, Coach, but not really. You understand what I mean?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it was, just communication. And I think that's the one thing that he did for us. He communicated with us. And some coaches are afraid of communication with young men. I'm not. I like communication because if I tell you as a linebacker, I need you to keep your outside arm free when somebody come block you, you're probably going to get on the edge of anybody coming and block you and really just jump outside and keep your outside arm free.
I'm very coachable that way, yes. That's exactly what I would do.
Exactly what you do. But instead you want the guy to say, hey, I need you to close the gap. So you need to hit that guy flush and then favor outside. That's what you want to do. So tell him that way instead of say, hey, when this block comes to you, just stay outside. Okay, I'll jump outside to where nobody can block me. That's just
you got to be specific and provide him detail, is what you're saying.
Yes, you got to be detailed about it, yes.
Now, you mentioned as a player comp, when somebody you would compare him to physically, I don't want people to miss this. You said Warren Sapp, and you played with Warren Sapp at Miami, or Miami. You played. He played.
Warren.
Yeah, he played for you
Warren
at Miami.
Right.
One of the great under tackles in the history of the game, a Hall of Famer.
Right.
And a Super Bowl winner. In what ways would you compare the two? I know you said he doesn't have quite the same athletic ability, and very few people do.
The quickness, they twitchy. They're very twitchy and very quick. Sapp was very powerful hand placement. And, just trying to compare what Coach Marinelli teaches and what Sapp went through and now what Trysten is going through. Trysten is taller than Sapp, a little bit taller than Sapp, but Sapp knew how to get his body to flip and turn to where I think that Trysten going to have to learn that in that next level. Understanding your body, you got to be able to turn your body a certain way because in that level, 200-300 pounders come on you quick. You better be able to get your body right where they're not knocking you off the football.
Did you have any sense in your interactions with the Cowboys, either scouting or coaching staff during this evaluation process, that they were specifically interested in him in a way that more so than maybe other teams?
Not really. No, everybody's called on him and talked about him. I know I played at Dallas, so, most of the guys who still there in the scouting department I know on first-hand basis. And so we always keep in contact about any players and things like that. And they called about him and wanted to know what I thought about him and how things went and stuff like that. So,
and knowing Marinelli like you do, you think this is a great fit for Trysten?
I think it's a tremendous fit for him. The guy that's going to work him to be the best that he can be, and he will go in the game because he's very, very smart. He'll learn the system quick, and he'll understand what Coach Marinelli means about get off the football because that's something that he can do.
Were there any other player when you came to Central Florida and spoke to Trysten about what your expectations were and how you wanted him to play? Was there film of guys you had him watch so that he could get a sense for what you were looking for?
No, not at all. I didn't do that. I try to coach guys and tell them what we want to expect out of them instead of comparing them. Yeah. A lot of times guys can't compare. and they don't want to be compared to anybody. They want to be individual. So those are things that I try to correct them on.
I don't know. I just wanted to bring this to your attention as a former Miami Hurricane player, and then you became the head coach there, and you've had a long-time association with the Cowboys. Just right before we started talking and recording this, the Doomsday podcast, went ahead and went with 2 straight picks, picked someone named Michael Jackson, I believe a cornerback from Miami, and then they took Joe Jackson from Miami. So Michael and Joe Jackson from the Hurricanes. So I think the Cowboys just decided, let's have kind of a hurricane round. So that has to I know you're Central Florida now, so that's where but you still have some ties to your old place.
Yes, I do. I still have ties, and I'm happy for Mike and Joe. I know both of those kids, and Dallas is doing some things I think what fits what they do on defense. I mean, they got a big guy and Mike, that is a corner. That's going to be a press corner, and they got an edge guy that can get around the edge. I mean, that's the one thing that if you watch the Dallas Cowboys, they're building that defense on getting real big push up the middle to get quarterbacks to bounce right or left to those fast defensive ends.
Hey, last thing for me, Randy. As Matt just said, and people generally know, you've had a very long, successful career as a coach. What did you take from Jimmy Johnson as you developed your own approach to coaching college and pro football players?
Oh, man. So many things that Jimmy's talked about and does, but the one thing he always says is that to make sure you be upfront and honest with the players when you communicate with them. It may hurt their feelings, but at least you're upfront with them. They will always trust you and believe in what you can do. Once you lose the trust of the players, you're done as a coach.
Well, obviously, you've done great things at Central Florida. They've had a great run there, and we expect continued success. And maybe next year the Cowboys or somebody else will draft another one of your players, and we can do this again. But we really appreciate you taking some time with us and giving us a real sense of what the Cowboys should expect from Trysten Hill, and it sounds very positive. I mean, if they get anything close to Warren Sapp, I think picking somebody who can compare at all to Warren Sapp at pick 58, the Cowboys be thrilled with that.
Yes, they will be, and they'll have a great time with Trysten Hill.
Thanks again, Randy. Great to catch up with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great stuff, Randy.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, there he was, Randy Shannon, the former head coach at Miami, former Dallas Cowboy player, came up under Jimmy Johnson, played for him in Miami, and then coached Trysten Hill at the University of Central Florida. Had 1 year with him, pretty important year as defensive coordinator at UCF. Obviously, UCF has become somewhat of a football powerhouse these last few years under Scott Frost and now Josh Heupel. Werder, I think, and I'm glad you followed up on it with him, the Warren Sapp comparison, I think that will get Cowboys fans really excited. We also addressed some of the things that maybe allowed Trysten Hill to fall to number 58. And I thought Randy Shannon, a lot of times coaches want to come on and just say, they're scared to say anything even slightly negative. Thought Coach Shannon was really honest and candid with us about some of the things that might have even held Trysten Hill back a little bit this past season.
Well, I think he answered the big question, which is how does a player who started as a freshman and a sophomore and is an NFL talent in the first 2-round talent in the NFL, how does that player not starting in his final year at a school? And I think he gave us a great sense for why that was. It sounds like oftentimes, if not always, Trysten Hill just was not very diligent in terms of his practice habits. And Randy Shannon, to his credit, created a standard and a protocol there where he expected his players to earn a starting position for that week's game based on how they perform in practice. And that being his expectation and his demand, Trysten Hill only met that once. And that's why he only started one game, even though he played in all of them and played a lot of downs. He just didn't earn the starting job every week. And so I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on how Rod Marinelli is able to motivate this player and get the talent out of this player. Now, he's world-renowned for his ability to do that, so I have very few doubts that he'll achieve that, but we've seen some failures along the way in that regard, or worse, with Randy Gregory or David Irving, in particular, is a guy whose work ethic was certainly questioned. So that's an issue for the Cowboys to be aware of, and clearly they are, as they begin this relationship with Trysten Hill. And I would think it would only be more difficult now that he's going to be paid millions of dollars up front just to sign his contract. So, very appreciative of Randy for giving us a real sense of the truth about this player, what the issues were. You can see now why somebody else maybe gets the impression he doesn't love football, or that he has issues and maybe he should be a 4th or 5th round pick. It's up to him now to prove what he is. Nobody gives more latitude to draft picks than Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. But Rod Marinelli is going to coach this kid hard. And in fact, I spoke to one other person who wasn't a scout, but and maybe you follow him on Twitter. Greg Gabriel is a former personnel man in the league with the Chicago Bears. And so when Rod Marinelli was there, so was Gabriel in the personnel department. So I reached out to him and I said, what do you think? And he said, Marinelli will make a Pro Bowl player out of Trysten Hill. He said he loves Trysten Hill's talent, but he needs to be pushed and that Rod will do that or kill him. So either way, Greg Gabriel thinks there'll be a significant result from this draft pick.
Yeah, that's interesting, and Ed, great job getting Randy Shannon on. I do want to bring up, before we get to Glenn Stretch Smith, our resident in-house scout, and we'll get his take on, he's looked at some of the film on some of these guys. He had done a lot of research. I almost feel bad for him on safety. He had holed up and he looked at every one of these safeties, and the Cowboys were there with several of those guys and ended up taking Trysten Hill instead of one of the safeties. I believe our man Thornhill, Juan Thornhill out of Virginia, was the other man who was the Cowboys were considering taking there, and I think this tells you, Ed, what the Cowboys think of that 3 technique. They feel like it's a more important position than a safety.
Right, and we saw them pay Tyrone Crawford a significant contract, expecting that he was going to be a dominant player inside, and he hasn't always been that. And in fact, sometimes he's been more successful playing at defensive end in certain situations.
Yeah. I mean, he can be dominant inside of Panama City Beach bars.
That's just an accusation, if it's even that. But it is interesting that the Cowboys passed on 3 safeties that they had visit who were available: Taylor Rapp, Juan Thornhill, and Nassie Adderley, all of whom went in the next 5 picks. So the Cowboys were looking at the right players.
Yeah.
They had the right guys there, and then they made a decision on which position they value more. It's hard to disagree with that. I think pressure up front is what everybody in football wants. Negative, plays for loss against your opponent is obviously a significant statistic in creating success, and he's a penetrating type of player when he's at his best. And I guess he'll be competing with Malik Collins for the starting job as a rookie, and Malik Collins is in the last year of his contract, so they're making an investment in this kid not only for the upcoming season but beyond.
Yeah, strong information there, Ed. And I will say the Cowboys, and we'll get into some more of these picks, and we'll talk to Glenn Stretch Smith coming up, as I mentioned. I did want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about, I thought it was interesting, the NFC East had a few cracks at this thing before the Cowboys ever got on the clock.
Yeah, well, because of the Amari Cooper trade, the Cowboys' competition in the NFC East combined to draft 8 prospects, including 2 potential franchise quarterbacks, before the Cowboys made their pick. The Giants and the Eagles drafted 3 players, and the Redskins 2 before the Cowboys were on the clock and made their decision on Trysten Hill. And it's interesting to me that if you look at the history of this team, and since Jerry Jones purchased it and became the general manager, that this is the 4th time in 20 years they didn't have a first-round draft pick, and each time it was because they traded it for a wide receiver. They traded the 2000 and 2001 picks for Joey Galloway. They traded the 2009 pick for Roy Williams, and obviously the 2019 pick for Amari Cooper. I would say that Cooper so far has been worth it far more than any of the other guys combined. So you got to look at Amari Cooper as part of this draft class, and if they get Amari Cooper and a guy who can play anything close to Warren Sapp with their first 2 picks, I think they would deem that a success. And I think they've gotten some other players, it sounds like, who can be unique contributors.
Yeah,
right away.
Connor McGovern taken in the 3rd round, 90th overall. Cowboys patting themselves on the back there for just staying with their board. And, you would think, well, Travis Frederick, isn't he okay from this syndrome that he had? Is he going to be
Guillain-Barré syndrome?
Yes. Is he going to be fine there? And they still continue to say that he is. But I guess this will create more depth because for now, he would be, if Travis Frederick is back, he would be kind of a swing guard, so to speak, a guy that could back up both guard positions and also play center. And Connor McGovern, this is a team that's identity has become around the offensive line. And they love this guy's intangibles that he brought to the table, and I think they believe that he will someday. The thought is, and you saw it last year with the injuries on the offensive line, that you could sit there sometimes and go, well, why do we need this guy? And then you get 6 games into the season, and you're like, well, this is exactly why we need him. And there's even some talk about last year's. The first
Connor
Williams, first pick that came to the Cowboys, a guy who's played at guard. Could he someday fill in out there for La'el Collins? Could if they end up leaving, they can't pay all these guys. Could he be a guy that moves out there to right tackle?
Or could he allow Zach Martin, who played some tackle at Notre Dame, to move outside? I think, just talking to people at the Star and asking the question, did you draft him, McGovern, because you need insurance against Travis Frederick failing to make it in his comeback, even though everything we've heard is very encouraging, and his expectation is that he'll be ready to play and play at the level he's accustomed to in 2019. Could he replace Connor Williams at left guard, allow him to move to his more natural position at right tackle, where La'el Collins is in the final year of his contract, or perhaps Zach Martin moves outside? And the answer I got was, hey, this is just a really good player whose mentality really and personality really fits our room, and he gives us depth now and future versatility. So I think the Cowboys have demonstrated they know what they're doing when they take offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think that is the case. Tony Pollard, 128th overall, Ed, 4th round out of Memphis, kind of a third down back. Zeke's not a guy. He likes to do the feed me thing, and he doesn't like, kind of like Witten, does not like to come off the field. So it's kind of weird to have a third down back when you don't really need one. But this guy was a big-time special teams player, return guy, can help you in all of those areas. And you do need to preserve Zeke at some point. And the thought is Pollard will be able to do that. Very versatile back, catches the ball. I think he had 9 touchdowns receiving, 9 rushing touchdowns this past season, and then had all those return touchdowns during his career. So a very versatile player there. And then, Ed, they got Miami Hurricane heavy, as we mentioned, with Randy Shannon. Michael Jackson, the big cornerback, the kind of cornerback that Chris Richard would like, kind of tall, rangy, and they'll see what they can get out of him. And then Joe Jackson, the defensive end, a really nice, I think, good value, had 24 sacks in his time at Miami, and so the thought was this guy's been very productive if you can get that guy in the 5th round. And after we talk to Stretch, I'll provide you, I've heard from somebody pretty high up with the Cowboys, and then I've heard someone from a GM in the league that has since weighed in on Trysten Hill, and they are divergent opinions, and so we'll get around to that.
Which we've already had some of that.
Yes, we have had,
and we've heard it directly. Well, not from the man himself, Trysten Hill, so much as the man who coached him.
Yes,
all of last season. And one more thing before we get to Stretch, you mentioned Pollard. Last year was an interesting situation because Ezekiel Elliott not only led the NFL in rushing for the second time in 3 seasons, but for the first time in his career, he led the Cowboys in receptions with 77, the most in franchise history for a running back. And I think that's unlikely to be duplicated between the return, as you mentioned, of Jason Witten, the tight end, and the presence of their 4th-round pick, Tony Pollard. And, he had 117 touches last year because Memphis had another pretty good running back in Darrell Henderson, who was drafted earlier. But Pollard scored 9 touchdowns on just 117 offensive touches. And I think he gives some big play ability on offense and on special teams. He tied the NCAA record for career kickoff returns for touchdowns with 7. Now, I think the Cowboys only returned 13 kickoffs all of last year because that part of the game has been
pretty much eliminated.
Eliminated by all the rules changes. But and our guest from last week, Rick Goslin, had this point that Pollard scored 25 career touchdowns on runs, receptions, and kickoff returns. The average length of his touchdowns was nearly 46 yards, and 10 of his touchdowns came from 50 yards or more away.
Okay.
So
big play guy, splash play.
Sounds kind of like a Tavon Austin jet sweep kind of a guy to me.
Yeah. Go, man. You can never have enough jet sweep guys. He's going to remind me of one of my favorite long time ago former players, Frank Pollard, who played with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another versatile back who.
Frank Pollard, wasn't he the former offensive line coach?
Frank Pollock is who you're thinking about.
Pollock. Okay.
Frank Pollard, former Pittsburgh Steelers great. Where did he play his college football?
I don't have any idea, but if I had to guess, I would say Baylor.
Baylor Bears, that's right. And it is now time to check in with Glenn and Stretch Smith. It is the Doomsday Podcast, and Ed Werder, we've already had Randy Shannon on talking the UCF defensive coordinator, talking about Trysten Hill. Now it's time to check in with our in-residence scout, former Cowboy scout and coach, Glenn Stretch Smith. And Stretch, you spent a lot of time, you were looking at these safeties, looking at a lot of film and everything. And, of course, you looked at pretty much a lot of different positions. Cowboys end up right there in that second round, and they take Trysten Hill. They were looking at the Virginia safety, and then they were looking at Trysten Hill. What were your initial thoughts when you saw that pick? They go with a kind of an inside rusher, 3 technique in Trysten Hill.
Well, and again, in this defense, I think, Marinelli wants that guy to go in there and eat that double team. He wants to be able to get Quinn and Lawrence loose on the edge, and so he wanted that. Was I surprised to see it in the second round? Was that a surprise to see a guy that didn't start every game, last year at Central Florida a little bit? But when the guys that you talk to, the people that that I talk to down there, they say he's got unbelievable push, lower body strength, and quite frankly, that's what Marinelli wants. And right now, it sounds like, since he's been in this organization, it's almost like if he walks in the draft room, kind of gives Jerry the old uncle thump on the chest, he kind of gets his way with whoever he wants. And right now, that's kind of what happens. I mean, I look up after the draft pick, I see Walter Julef, who's been around that organization since Shep was a pup. He's a big old dog, and then Marinelli's standing there. You don't see Jason and the Jones family. You see Marinelli and Walter Julef. So it sounds like he's getting his way with what he wants, and quite frankly, maybe they're happy with how he's evaluated guys and what he's done. I question the pick too because I like Taco Charlton coming out, and I'll be honest with you, I like him better than Gary in this year's draft. And I looked at Gary probably 6 games, and really, I go back and I like Taco more. But quite frankly, for whatever reason, Taco is not, he's not taken to the state, or doesn't seem to be taken to the style of coaching that's coming from the defensive line right now. It's baffling to me, but for whatever reason, Rod Marinelli gets his guy, and this is the guy that he wanted. And, kudos to him for going in there and tap dancing on that table and saying, here's my guy.
So would you have misgivings about pairing Rod Marinelli and his coaching approach with a guy in Trysten Smith who, according to Randy Shannon, his defensive coordinator that we just spoke to, basically said you had to earn your starts in practice during the week, and he only did that once. Do you consider that alarming given what went on last year with Taco Charlton and the fact he was a healthy scratch several games last year?
I do, Ed. I do consider that alarming, but I mean, maybe he's one of those guys that likes to eat Tabasco on every meal, and Marinelli's going to come in there with a big old bottle and douse it every day and see if he can get him a little different attitude and see if he'll respond a little better to that, to that coaching during the week. And, I'll say this, that if you can keep your weight on in Central Florida, whether it be Orlando or wherever it is, and you can maintain that kind of weight in really what is a melting summer heat and that young man was able to do that, I mean, can you imagine what could happen here? I mean, he get down here and get to eating Papados and some of this good food we got in the Metroplex. He might get up there at 340 in a real hurry.
Well, you've seen it. He comes off the ball really quickly. There's some questions. There's always a few questions when a guy this talented gets down there to 58. Now, Stretch, give us the I want to just get your observations real quick as we go the rest of it. They basically tried to get part of the Jackson 5 when they got down there to the 5th round. Michael Jackson, a cornerback, Joe Jackson, the defensive end from Miami. But let's go with those the 3rd round pick and the 4th round pick. I want to just get your thoughts on what you from a philosophical standpoint, what the Cowboys are trying to accomplish. They don't. It doesn't seem like they needed a center or a guy who could play both guard positions, but they did take one in Connor McGovern. What did you make of that pick?
Well, I really think that what Will McClay and that staff tried to do is just line those guys up. Hey, let's take the scouts' grades. Let's get them lined up on the board. We have a young football team. It doesn't matter, who we pick. We need to pick the best guy that we feel like will fit in to this organization. And again, I think that's what they did with the center guard out of Penn State. They needed to back up running back, and they got there in the 4th round and said, hey, here's a guy that we have highly ranked. And you know what? So what if he doesn't get a lot of snaps? But we've got to have somebody else in this position. And I think, that's exactly what they did. I was a little disappointed because I really thought they might go after Foster Moreau. I mean, I really like that kid out of LSU. I mean, he is physical, inline blocker. Now, he's not a very polished route runner, but he ran a 4.65, and I thought, okay, here's somebody that they might go at. And I guess, maybe I'm wearing my personal feelings a little bit because that's who I wanted him to take, and having come out there, I haven't hit it right in about 3 years. With the winning horse, much less the 4th place horse in a damn superfecta. So I'm probably not doing very good there. But I wanted Foster Moreau bad. But what this team did was supplement, I think, what is a good young football team with some guys who can go and challenge for positions and give you some depth. And right now they got to be happy with where they're at as far as trading that first pick for Amari Cooper. When you look at what was there at 28 and think about what they got and then how they've addressed the needs of their football team with, I'm going to trust Will McClay and say, hey, you know what? They lined them up the best they could, and these are the guys that they've got. So providing depth, was obviously something that they went into this draft trying to get done.
This sounds like a description of Larry Lacewell's most infamous draft, back when he took Sherman Williams with his first pick because they had such a good, complete football team. There was nobody in the draft who could make this team as a starter, so we just started drafting backups. I don't think that's what you're saying, right?
That's not what I'm saying, but certainly I get the comparison and seeing that I was here when that happened, and I can remember that, and I guess that's why I'm on the phone with you guys. That's exactly what
Jerry remembered it too.
That's right.
No, but Stretch, let's talk about the running back position and the kid that they got, Pollard. Obviously, he's an explosive type of player. He's not just a runner. He's a receiver. He's a special teams threat. Has scored a lot of touchdowns, a lot of 50-plus yard touchdowns. But he's not a very good blocker. Can you play around that as a 3rd down back? That used to be, man, if you can't block for and protect the quarterback, we can't have you in there on 3rd down. But Alvin Kamara and those guys seem to have changed the equation that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be Gary Brown's challenge. I mean, I think that they're going to say, you know what, he runs the ball with a physical style. We need to get him coached up in that situation. I mean, in the NFL, and I've argued with personnel people this year, hey, the game's changed. It hasn't changed. Because when I see and I watch the game, if they're going to tackle, you better figure out a way to block them. And that means your running backs. That means your receivers in the perimeter. So I'm going to guess that, you know what, this is somebody that Gary Brown, probably went in and said, you know what, I think I can coach him up and get him to play as physical without the ball as he does with the football. And I'm just, again, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm telling you, if you're going to be a third down back in this league, you better be able to butt the linebacker up in the mouth, the safety, whoever they bring. And I think when you really start talking about that, to me, that's a mentality, and that's something that has to be coached, and it's something that has to be taught from day one. And I'll guarantee you, that's exactly what this coaching staff is going to be talking to him about. Is, you know what, you better attack this linebacker or this safety block in the same way you do if you have the football in your hand.
And the great thing is this staff can point out that Zeke Elliott has won 2 rushing titles in 3 NFL seasons, but hey, watch him block. I mean, he does that exceptionally well.
That's exactly right. And I know that they're wanting all of that to rub off on him. And I'm going to bet you that this young man probably, has displayed some of those characteristics, and that's why the Cowboys, took the flyer on him. And being a good special teams player, you got to be able to, contribute in those areas.
All right, there he is, Glenn Stretch Smith. Good work, Stretch, on all your preparation, and appreciate you. You look good on TV the other night, the Channel 8 preview, going right into ABC's coverage of the draft. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Stretch.
Thanks, Mosley. Yeah, I take a bath every once in a while and clean up. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Every Sunday.
Yeah, he's been known to put one of those like
whether I need one or not.
That's right.
Thanks, guys.
See you, buddy.
There he goes, Glenn Stretch Smith, joining the Doomsday Podcast. Okay, final thoughts here. We've had Randy Shannon. We've had Glenn Stretch Smith on to talk about this class. Cowboys, as we record this, continue to they've stacked up some draft choices. I like the fact that on night 2, they really kind of bragged on themselves for, hey, we used to kind of trade down, but all the best players are up in the front of the draft. We stay, and on day 3, which is understandable because it is a little different quality of player, but they start trading down like crazy, Ed, and they've created more picks for themselves. But a couple of things I wanted to add, and I know, my goodness, I can see you scrolling through your notes over there. If we'd go another 2 hours if we were able to get all that research on, and I don't suggest we do that. I did hear from a couple of folks. Okay, so the good and bad of Trysten Hill. You introduced earlier in this show, you talked to GMs, some scouts across the league. And,
defensive
coordinators. And what I did is reached out to a guy that's pretty high up in the Cowboys organization, and of course they're gonna say nice things about Trysten Hill. You're not gonna have people out there at the Cowboys being too harsh with this one, but very talented, they said of Hill. Could end up being very, very good. His skill set fits our scheme perfectly. Okay, we then go to a GM in the league, and this is a GM I've known for a lot of years. And this GM, when asked directly about Trysten Hill, the second-round pick for the Cowboys, number 58 overall, the defensive lineman out of University of Central Florida, just simply responded with, just a guy.
Ooh, just a guy.
The dreaded Jag.
So we've had just a guy. Uh-huh. We've had not sure he loves football. And we've had a 4th or 5th round pick.
Yeah.
So
to go along with some real positive things.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And people, I think that's the great thing, is to get, opinions across the spectrum and not just the opinions of the people at the Star who picked this guy and now have to sell the pick to the public. I'm sure they believe everything they say. Obviously, they like the guy. They're paying him millions of dollars to come in and be a defensive player and raise the performance of this football team and make them a perennial Super Bowl contender. That's their goal. Whether he's that or whether he's Taco Charlton or worse, Ebenezer Ekubon or Shante Carver, all remains to be determined by how well he plays and how much this defensive coaching staff, especially Rod Marinelli, who this player carries his personal stamp of approval. It's very clear Rod Marinelli wanted this player. And Rod Marinelli has a great reputation for developing defensive line talent. His reputation probably exceeds that of any other coach in the entire league other than maybe Dante Scarnecchia in terms of being the guru of his position.
Yeah,
I think that's a fair thing to say.
I think you're right. And what he's done at Tampa Bay and what he's done at Chicago, all of those things are accurate. Cowboys, as we tape this, continue to sort of pick away into the evening and get those two players from Miami. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this thing finishes up. Of course, Ed, I may take the Doomsday Podcast, all our equipment, including
we have equipment?
The great Frito, out there to the Star for this rookie camp and try to meet some of these guys.
And maybe Trysten can speak to us for himself.
Directly. Yeah, Trysten, after we've talked to Randy, Shannon, and others. Great work. You've talked to a lot of folks. I've talked to some folks, but I think the Randy Shannon interview really shines for us, and we'll get this on out there to our folks. It is the Doomsday Podcast. Any parting thoughts, Ed, before we say goodnight?
I think the interesting thing, if you look at the overall division, is you've now got two franchises that have made their decision on who their franchise quarterback is going to be. The Giants with the surprising pick to some at 6, not so much that they took a quarterback, but that the quarterback they took, Daniel Jones, who probably wasn't a top 2 quarterback on a lot of boards in the NFL. But it's interesting that Eli Manning being allowed to play the final year of his contract for the first time in his career. Ben Roethlisberger just got extended. Well, he was drafted the same year as Eli Manning, who is not being treated accordingly. So obviously the Giants are making a quarterback change at some point this year or next, probably this year. And then the Redskins also get Ohio State's Dwayne Haskins sitting right where they were to get a quarterback that some people think is a better prospect than Kyler Murray. So the NFC East is now a division of 4 young quarterbacks, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, and the 2 drafted this week.
Yeah, and the 2 drafted this week, there's Eli's going to get to start. Case Keenum will start the Redskins, and so we'll see when they.
Jay Gruden said when you draft a quarterback at 15, you should give him every chance to win the job. Well, if you're taking one at 15 and giving him the chance, then I'd say at 6 you're probably giving him a chance too.
Yeah, but Jay Gruden has some kind of rift with Dan Snyder. I think he just wants to throw him out there to show Snyder he was wrong.
Let's not forget this. Yeah, we expect right now Eli Manning to start, but if Pat Shurmur and Dave Gettleman are as smart as I think they are, then you handle this like Pete Carroll and John Snyder did with the Seahawks when they signed, what was the guy's name out of Green Bay for?
Matt Flynn for
$10 million, and then draft Russell Wilson in the 3rd round, and Russell Wilson outplays the guy in the preseason and in training camp. Then you let the guy win the job if he wins the job.
But they all defer to the Manning family. The Manning family made this pick, basically. They're like, they named Eli's successor, and I think they're so still scared of Archie, Peyton, and the whole family, and David Cutcliffe, the Duke football coach, that in their minds, who coached Eli, of course, at Ole Miss, in their minds, Eli, you got to just almost leave him out there until you drag him off the field or something. So
that's not how it happened for Troy Aikman. That's not how it happened for Joe Montana. That's not how it happened for Johnny Unitas. That's not how it happened for Joe Namath. That's not how it happened for Brett Favre. And I don't think ultimately that's how it's going to happen for Eli.
Yeah, most of those guys were replaced by better people than Daniel Jones. What a weird. Okay, he looks like he's like.
Let's give him a chance.
6'5". Okay. I'm not going to give him a chance until he does something. I'm going to have an opposite approach. It is the.
It's too bad you don't do that Giants podcast anymore with Justin Tucker.
Oh, we may bring it back. We may bring it back. Doomsday Podcast, the
Only Survivor
post-draft special. And we are we stop. Talk about undermining. It is a wonderful show that we've put together, and please enjoy it. Everybody have a great rest of the weekend. Doomsday Podcast signing off from far North Dallas.
Stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.